Alright, what's going on, guys? Time to start our typical morning live stream for our week here. I've said that we've been kind of messing around with this new schedule all week long. So let me go ahead and open up our stream chat here real quick just so people can see what everybody's saying on Twitch as well as YouTube. And that'll take just a second there to open. And in the meantime, I started a quick render scene in Keyshot for our Bowser Jr. sculpt that I've been working on here. So just a quick little export and then some hard, rough plastic materials applied to that in a little render scene that I have set up in Keyshot already. So while that's rendering, it's about a third of the way through there. We can pop open ZBrush and get to what we normally do, which is a little bit of sculpting and playing around and having some people come in here, ask some questions, and just hang out. I don't really have anything particular planned for today in terms of a character or anything like that, so I think today's going to be a pretty chill stream, as well as just giving people the opportunity to pop on in and if there's anything specific that you guys are looking for and maybe have some questions about workflow or otherwise, we can kind of look at some of those things. My cough is pretty much gone. It's like just barely hanging on there, and I think I'll be okay. I just have to clear my throat every now and again. But we got our Contigo, we got our water, and we are all set to go. So like I said, I don't really have too much planned in terms of what I want to accomplish this stream. So I'm thinking we can just do some sketching and playing around. And instead of starting from our just a base sphere, we can start from an actual base sculpt and maybe attempt to accomplish something a little bit more finished in a shorter amount of time. So I typically like to use my own base meshes. If you go to my Gumroad channel, or Gumroad/Follygon here, you'll find this Follygon female base mesh. That's what I'm about to import here in just a second, if I can find it. Anatomy and human, and I believe female base mesh Z-tool. This is a different one. I have a bunch of female base meshes. Here's just a similar one that's, or actually these are two different. If you guys are familiar with IO Doomlord, he's a character artist. This is his base mesh that is available for free. If you just Google IO Doomlord, you should be able to find that. I believe I got this from one of the books that's recommended that I have down in the description. It comes with a CD, and yeah. You can get a bunch of 3D files from that sort of stuff. But let me find. Here we go. 1012. And here is the split version, I believe, which we can open up, turn off all polygroups for. And you can see what we have here is essentially different separated pieces of geometry, which is a technique that I like to recommend a lot. Axel says hello, welcome to the stream, Axel. We're looking at a couple base meshes here real quick before we get started. So let's just go back real quick. The IO Doomlord base mesh, which is available for free. I'm just looking at a few of my female base meshes that I have on hand. This is one that I made recently that you can get from my Gumroad page. This is the split anatomy version, and I believe I have the Z tool for the one with actual. So this one's a little bit more combined and a little bit more finished, and I believe you get both of these with that Gumroad Gumroad, I don't know, shop item, I guess is what they're called. So I do include the split as well as the standard version here, this one. So layer clear, just to get rid of some of that extra canvas stuff. And we can plop off our nips just so YouTube doesn't get too upset with us. And begin using this as a base. I think I'm going to turn that off, and we can look a little bit more at our face and kind of playing around with what we have here. I've used this for a number of things in the past. I've used this is closer to anatomical correctness. It's I think it's closer to around 7 heads. We can check on that real quick. But you can use this and use, like I said, something that's a little bit closer to anatomical correctness. This is stylized as well. But you can use something like this to even get something that's, you know, extremely stylized. So that's like 1.5, so it should be 7, 8, 9, 10 and a half-ish units. 13. Let's see here. 1, 2 at the ribs, 3 belly button, 4. So yeah, I'd say this is actually closer to 8 heads here. So very kind of tall and heroic proportions. What you would call that. There's like a model for roughly 7, it's like 7.5, 7 to 8 heads for those heroic proportions, and you'll see that in a lot of superhero characters. But for today, we're just kind of going to be sketching around and playing with our character here. Again, that more split version, if that's something that you want. You can have a little bit more control over certain stuff here. If we flip back and forth between the difference in these, you can see that stuff is combined. You start losing maybe some of the detail and information that you want to really exemplify here. So if either one of those is something that you're interested in, you could check those out on my Gumroad again. But yeah, not too much planned for today's kind of morning stream session. So I think we're just going to kind of play around, and if there's anything specific you want to see, you can let me know. But maybe we can look around at creating some clothes here, some clothing. And I don't think we've done that on stream anytime recently in my memory. So I think that might be fun to kind of play around with. I have some subdivs on a lot of this. That's at 4. I'm just going to step up that clavicle piece just once there and merge that down. So looking at clothes, clothing can be a little tough, especially we're going to look at a shirt here first. I think that'll be fun. But if you're wanting to create a shirt and just kind of create it in ZBrush here, one of those really popular methods that I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with is using an extraction. But if your arms are kind of pressed up against your body, kind of depends on the pose. I'm going to make a really quick and bad movement here, but if your arms are more out in a T-pose position, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to create your shirt that way. But if they're in more of a relaxed position, we should be able to kind of get around that a little bit. We can look at a few different methods for that. Let's go ahead and start here though and try to do our best. So I'm just going to select my torso piece, and luckily I have subdivs, which can be very helpful for this sort of thing. So I'm just going to start here by creating a mask lasso and doing an extraction. And I also want to mask off this top portion, like so, maybe a little bit more. And the reason I'm kind of masking off the caps here is that when you do an extraction, and I'll just do a quick one here, even though it's going to be pretty large. it's actually pretty thin, based on our size. But when you do an extraction this way, and we can click accept on that, with these caps kind of masked off, you're going to see that we're going to get a nice thickness to this, and it's not going to close any holes all the way at the caps. So for the top and bottom, we have some nice openings, and we also have some nice poly groups in here. So blue outside, green inside, and then we have orange for our edges here. And we can come through on this piece and modify some of this if we want to delete some edge loops, anything like that. What's also nice about extraction, if I flip back and forth between these two, you're going to see that the topology is exactly the same for these pieces. So you can see we got some pretty crap topology there. Well, that's because it was on our base mesh there as well. So it'll keep and retain all that topology. So depending on the resolution of this piece that you have underneath, it can definitely affect the resolution of your extracted piece, in this case a shirt. So what I would like to do is Z-remesh this piece and attempt to get a little bit lower poly piece. We can try around 1K with keep groups on. Again, that's going to be very important for this, just because we have 3 different poly groups here that we want to kind of save those separations between. So we can see what kind of reaction we get from this, and hope that it simplifies our geometry enough for our purposes. And it seems like it did a pretty good job there. It actually gave us some nice clean edge loops as well. So I think I'm pretty happy with that, as well as using that as a good resolution point to start from. Similarly, we can come into our arms, and because our mesh is split, that's why we're doing these separately, and then we can kind of combine them down the road. USAC says, "Hey Ben, it's been a while. Glad to have you with us, USAC. Glad that you could come join us on the stream. It has been a little while, but hope you're doing well always." So let's do the same thing that I just did there with our extraction. So masking off here for our armies to get some sleeveys, and we can do another extract at the 0.02 value, and those seem to be quite a bit thicker. Extract again. Yeah, I think I already had some default thickness set for this, that 0.003, so let's go to about there. So 0.00, oh, I'm going the wrong way. 0.003, extract, and accept. Clear my mask on that. I can step that back up. And I would like to try to remesh this as well. Let's try that real quick. Z-remesh, maybe a little bit lower, keep groups on, and a nice clean cylinder. Very good. So through here, and find our shirt piece and our sleeve piece. We'll move those a little bit closer together, and we can even combine them. Obviously there's a problem if we're making just like a standard t-shirt. You can see that we have, you know, with my t-shirt, it obviously goes up and wraps around my neck, whereas what we have is more of just some open capped pieces. And the reason we did that was so that we could get those nice clean separations, those nice clean poly groups from there. But now we can kind of come through and make additional changes here. Another thing we want to avoid when doing this is, turn that off. If we are to combine these arms and the arms and body, if we were to dynamesh those together, just because of the position of our arms, you can see that we could get the geometry to kind of come down pretty far there, all the way down to that point, and in the front it would come down even farther. We're not going to want that. We're going to want a nice tight crease there. If you look at me, I don't know if you can see me that far down, but when I have my arm down, get a nice clean crease, and the sleeve is actually tucked up under my armpit. We're going to want something similar here, so we want the shirt to be able to go and be tucked up all the way under her armpit here. So let's continue to look at our shirt here. Can we keep sharp edges using ZRemesher? Using ZRemesher. So ZRemesher is the auto topology tool that I just used there. And the way that you can keep some sharp edges, you can't keep creases per se, but what you can do is, let's look here. I'm trying to think of a good way to illustrate this. Using the keep polygroups function, the keep groups function right there, you can keep very specific separations. So I would say that these, because of these polygroups up here, it has done a very good job of keeping those sharp edges, those sharp changes and transitions there. And that was done with ZRemesher, but obviously when I subdivide, it's going to lose that sharp edge. So all you have to do is come back in after you've created these polygroups in ZRemeshed and go into Crease Edge Loop Complete and recrease those edges. So not too hard. Again, here's another example here where I created this polygroup. Let's say I ZRemesh this really low. I have keep groups turned on. And because we're getting a little bit of a weird interaction there, that's not exactly what we're looking for, but the geometry of our new mesh here, it's telling ZRemesher, hey, whatever you have to do, make sure that you keep this polygroup here. Make sure you conform to this change that I am creating. I'm going to go ahead and undo that because it's the same group on the inside and it's creating a little bit of a bad form change there if we do want to ZRemesh that later and keep groups. So we want to avoid that in this case, at least in the middle. But using that keep groups function is allowing me to keep these nice hard creases along these areas. Alright, so those meshes are separated, and what we can look at is creating some geometry up here that we can blend into these pieces. And this is also like a really nice and simple way if you're wanting to create a dress maybe or something like that. You have the sleeves off and maybe bare shoulders for the dress or something. So you have a lot of, I think, different options for creating some interesting forms with extractions. I can often use them for armor pieces as well. So extract is it's a pretty old tool in ZBrush, but I think a lot of people still use it, and I definitely enjoy using it as well. And we can maybe make some modifications and just kind of pull some stuff around with our move brush. And even after all this, we can remesh it and try to get a little bit better flow of polys here. So just a quick example of how you could use this extraction to maybe get a dress, or if you want to cover up the top and add some geometry up there to get a shirt. You can kind of play with this, as this would tuck more under the armpits like I was saying. Do something like that. And also what's nice with working this way is that you have some pretty low poly objects here that you can come through and say, I have too many poly loops, too much geometry kind of bunching up down here. I just want to go through and delete some extra edge loops. So let's do that. And up here at the top, you can see that they're getting pretty tight, so maybe we can delete a few of these as well. And just come through here and make our geometry a little bit more clean. And because this is only taking care of that geometry on the outside edge, if you really want to, you can go through and clean it up on the inside as well. And then down here, obviously a lot less polys in terms of polygon distribution. So if you want to add some more edge loops, I was kind of just doing a quick and dirty pull down with my move brush, but you can always remesh from this point as well. We can try to do a quick additional Z remesh with keep groups on, just to see what our new polygon redistribution will be like. You can see that it's done a fairly good job here just with that automatic operation. And the keep groups has not been too successful up here. So let's step this back and I'll show you another thing that you can do. So again, we have those poly groups at this point. USAC says, oh, I see, thank you. Yeah, so Z remesh, that's pretty much the only way you can keep those creased edges. I'm going to turn on double. Double allows me to see back-facing polygons. And essentially, if you're creating this for 3D print, or if you're in a situation where you do not want back-facing polygons, we can come through here, just select our outside edges, delete hidden, and now we just have these hollow polygon faces. So if I turn off double, which doesn't allow you to see back face polys, you can see that we only have those front facing normals. And if you're trying to save on on resources here, this is a great way to do that. So at this point, let me Z remesh again. We'll try, like, if I can, 0.5-ish without typing. And from this point, you could go through and manually close your caps, or you could just run a quick close holes operation. And with that close holes operation, it makes all that geometry watertight. But you don't have to do that, obviously, if you just want to keep these polygon faces here. So extract, another great way to just get some single facing polys here. You don't have to keep that default thickness by any means. And then you can make some changes and modify this however you see fit. Shoes are a little bit different. We can maybe look at some different forms of clothing and how I would go about creating some shoes. Or since her feet are maybe so extreme in this position up on her toes, we can create some particular heels. Definitely use reference. I definitely recommend using reference for all of this stuff. This was a pretty quick, just generic pull down of this, so this isn't anything special, and we can obviously, you know, develop on top of this and take it wherever we want to go, and actually maybe put some straps, some shoulder straps, and maybe some filigree detail that you could extract out on top of this as well. So we can just grab a mask brush, make sure we have the right mask tool here. Maybe you want to create some patterns or something down here. So something simple like that. That was pretty quick. And let's just run an extraction on here and then pull that information out. And we can do a little bit less thick. Let's say that's perfect. Let's say that's exactly what we're looking for. And again, we have those separate polygroups. And what's great about having all those nice clean separations in polygroups? That's right, we can do a keep groups operation with our Z remesh. And it cleans all that up for us without very much work at all. Can even get some lower poly stuff on there. So a quick little way to create some little filigree detail or something like that, or maybe even some stitching or whatever you want to use that for. So a lot of different options there with extraction. For the shoes, for the heels, I probably wouldn't use too much extraction. Maybe do something like, oh gosh, just inserting a primitive and then start modifying that way. If I were to use extract, it would just be for some straps around the feet or maybe something like that. Just kind of getting a rough base of what I would want that to look like. And then extracting that geometry and then modifying it more on top of that. So we can look at some of that stuff as well, or if anybody has anything else specific they would like to see while we are here. What are you making this time? Asks Mr. Ant. We're not doing anything too specific today, just kind of hanging out and having a bit more of a chill stream because we are doing a quick little render of our Bowser Jr. sculpt here in Keyshot. It's progressed about 5% in the last 20 minutes or so. So it's going pretty slow there as it has to do a bunch of calculations to get that realistic, physically based rendered materials and all that jazz. But we're just kind of playing around with one of my base meshes here. And I have a ton of base meshes that I was showing off earlier. This is my most recent personal base mesh that I use for a good starting place. Specifically today, so far we've looked at doing some extractions on clothing to create some pretty quick and simple forms, as well as having single-sided polys after doing that. If you're making something that's maybe has to be a little more low poly, that's a technique that a lot of people will use for their clothing and armor or other little accoutrements that you might add on your character, as well as using some extraction for little detail. Maybe you want to put some detail on your armor or whatever you're working on. Just other examples of using extraction for that. I'm trying to think where I have some shoes. I think I did some pretty crappy shoes on a somewhat recent character here. We can check it out. I don't know if this is... Whoops. Guess it doesn't like that file. We did get our recovery ZBrush file stored there. But if you guys saw my little Starbucks girl that I was working on a couple months back, maybe a month or so, you can check that out here in a sec if it's going to load. Lightbox, give me just the recovered tool. I don't need all the extra junk. That is not the correct file. I don't even know where that came from. Very odd. Let's try this recovered ZBrush project, ZPR. I recommend that you save your files as a ZTL, by the way, most of the time. And wow, our ZBrush project there, not too happy. Very strange that it saved that tool and not this one. Ornamental glass heels. Yeah, that could be a thing. Ornamental glass heels. Do people actually wear glass heels? I don't think that's really a thing. I don't know why this file isn't loading. It must be corrupt or something's going on there. I wonder if I can just open it by itself and see if ZBrush will open that. It's weird because, Okay. This isn't even actually the correct file that I'm loading in here. So this is my fault. This is just junk. So let's do our quick save that we just took. And I have the correct ZTL now. Starbuck 3, posed, and you guys can see some of this here. And can turn on all the junk that we got here that we were playing around with, as well as taking a look specifically at some shoes. We have a lot of unmaterial non-material stuff here that we can correct maybe really fast, and take a look at some of the stuff that we've done in here. And we can shift our light a little bit. And then I have a bunch of skirts that I was playing around with turned on as well. I haven't really touched this file in quite a long time, in a couple months at least. But yes, we can look at our heels down here. And try to turn off some of this junk so that we can see. So there's some weird stuff going on here. Weird blocky objects. If we look down here in my subtool palette, though, you can see that these are set to negatives, negative pieces, so there and there. And with this being the start group of that Boolean. So if we turn on live Boolean up here, you can see that those subtractions occur there, creating that heel shape that we are looking for. And obviously there is additional geometry there, and just the way that we would apply all that. I can turn live Boolean back on. If I wanted just this shape, and I have this posed, I would normally not pose these without first creating the Boolean subtraction, but I wasn't sure if I even liked this basic shape here. So real quick, we'll just do a Boolean op. Boolean, make Boolean mesh, and we can take a look at that here real quick. And we want to make sure that we get the correct material on there, of course, and then we can append that back here. And I'm just gonna slide that back up to our shoe junk and take a look at what we're working with. So pretty simple shape. Nothing crazy. I don't know where my little feet are. There's one. Pretty simple shape here for the foot as well. Nothing crazy. So I think I just box modeled this, and I actually know I did, based on the geometry that I have here. So I started off box modeling this basic shape here, and then just created, again, those subtraction pieces here and here to create those negatives that allowed us to get this final shape here. What's great about the new live Boolean features is how quick you can just make these changes. So if I want my heel, if I can grab my transpose tool, if I want my heel to be a little bit shorter, I can make that change on the fly by masking this off and just sliding it up. Similarly, if I want it to be taller, I can make those changes. And then I would have to modify my other Boolean piece, but maybe I like this shape, something like that. There's a lot of room for experimentation, I think, with live Booleans, and a lot of room for some really cool and just interesting, happy accidents, I would say, to happen, especially when you're working with mechanical stuff. There's a lot of really cool, where is it? It might be this brush, but there's a lot of really cool Might be just the chisel brush here. There's a lot of really cool new strokes and different insert mesh brushes that come with ZBrush 4R8 that allow for some really neat stuff. So here it is, your insert multi-mesh Boolean brush. So with this, there's a lot of really cool negatives that you can create. The ball radar is just a really interesting one, and I think it gives you a really cool idea of how live Boolean actually works. We can grab our legs here, keep live Boolean on, and we can just take a quick look at what this would be. Just for the people that aren't too familiar with live Booleans. So I'm just inserting this shape here on our mesh, on our legs. And if you take a look at this piece, it looks a little bit strange. It's flipped inside out almost. But what you get when you turn on your negative subtraction piece here with a live Boolean turned on, of course, you get some really interesting additive shapes, subtractive and additive shapes on your mesh. And then of course you can, turn on dynamic subdivs and maybe subdivide this and just get some really cool, interesting, unique things to kind of appear that might not be immediately apparent by looking at some of these objects. Then of course, you can move this around. Obviously, you wouldn't probably place this on your legs, I would hope, for your character's sake. But yeah, there's, again, just some really interesting things you can do here. And maybe just try to understand how live Booleans work a little bit better, as I think they're a little bit confusing at first until you really kind of start playing around with them and understanding what these shapes, what these crazy negative shapes here are actually attempting to accomplish. We can look at maybe another one here, just an oval piece. And as I draw that out on my mesh, you're like, wow, that creates a really interesting shape on there. But again, it's this long piece of geometry that is creating that negative on top of there. So I can take that and slide that in and make additional changes to whatever I'm most likely and hopefully hard surface modeling here. HUDboy says, hello Folly, welcome to the stream. Glad you could pop in with us. I know that you're typically busy in the morning, so glad to have you with us. Kind of looking at a bunch of different little techniques and little tricks here for different things. Hide that. So far, while waiting for our quick little keyshot render here, it looks like it's actually almost finished. The the percentage up here of completion for rendering, it's not very accurate. What happens is it'll go really slow up until about, you can see how pixelated it is here. That's where it's rendering. It'll go in a circular fashion around and around your image. And once it gets past that point on the character, it'll render the background of the image relatively quick, just a lot faster. And even if I want, I can just stop the render at that point, and I will have what is currently rendered of it, and I don't have to worry about the background, as I'm probably going to be removing that entirely. Alright, so if anybody doesn't have anything specific that they would like to see, I was just kind of doing a quick overview here of maybe some extraction and clothing techniques here in ZBrush. Just some fun little additional tips and tricks for people that maybe don't use extraction all too much. But I say we go ahead and start doing a little bit of sketching, playing around here. And if, again, there's anything specific you guys want to see, we can look at that. So I am waiting for that render. This guy, that's going to be a little bit while longer, probably at least another, I would guess, hour or two. So I'm just waiting for that to complete, And once it does, we can move on to our next project, which I haven't decided on yet. Doing some little sketches in between larger scale projects. So if there's a particular character you guys think would be fun to play around with and work on that I might be interested in, let me know, and maybe we can look at making that in today's stream, or maybe our stream that's going to be later in the afternoon today. But in the meantime, it's sketch time. I think today we want to play around with working with a single mesh piece and Dynamesh. I'm just kind of playing around with that. Trying to get some interesting shapes. If you guys are familiar with the idea of kit bashing, essentially the basic premise is taking a bunch of different kits or different model pieces, parts, and sticking them all together until you start to form something interesting from that. You can do that with the idea of trying to build an interesting silhouette, or you can do that with the idea of trying to find an interesting silhouette and not having a specific direction. So right now I'm just kind of throwing some spheres on something and just kind of playing around with that and trying to maybe find something to create here. So not really super intentive here. Maybe we're starting to create something a little bit more insectoid, so I can start leaning that direction a little bit more and seeing what we can come up with as I delete and slice off a bunch of stuff. We can play with shapes here too. I'm just kind of playing around with our singular mesh. It's kind of looking a little witch doctor-y as we go here. Hudboy says, I sent something you'll want to see to your Discord. You should check that out. I will, I absolutely will. Where did you send it? Into the ZBrush Discord so that I know where to look. More than a few different channels in there. Let's lower our resolution. I recommend if you're, working a little kit-bashedly that you keep your poly count low, especially if you don't know where you're trying to go. Just kind of play around with different ideas and shapes. He's looking very, like I said, witch doctor-y and chickeny almost. But I don't know. You can come up with something interesting here, hopefully. And maybe something. Cut him off and throw in another sphere. Maybe he's the witch doctor of the future. Hudboy says, post it on the, or I can post it on the 3D printing channel if you would prefer. Oh, I PM'd it to you. Let's see here. From Hudboy, we have our pumpkin doggo print. That's what I suspected. This is, let's see here. If I can open up my browser, the correct one. When was it? I guess a couple months back, not Gmail, but Instagram. A couple months back, around Halloween, or I guess this was maybe a little bit more than that because it was Sculptember, I created a little pumpkin puppy here in ZBrush. Whoops. You can check him out. And I think I did that in just like a day. We were doing a bunch of different things for Sculptember, a bunch of daily sculpts, and Hudboy here wanted to do a quick little print, so I made a print-ready file real fast, and he did a couple prints previously, if we scroll back and look up through those, but I think he got a newer printer. I'm not sure what kind of FDM machine it was, but it looks FDM from what I can tell here. Most likely PLA, I would guess. But yeah, it looks a lot better than the previous version, which I think failed. So this is pretty neat to see. And again, here is the digital version there for comparison. So to do the 3D print ready version of that, it was mainly just a lot of activation of the Boolean subtractions that needed to happen. These were all live Booleans that I needed to do. And then dynameshing and combining a lot of these parts and pieces. I think he was a solid piece. I can't remember off the top of my head, honestly. But Hudboy probably knows and remembers since he's printed it most recently. It's a Prusa i3 Mark II. And it is PLA, but yeah, there he is. Looks very cool, awesome. I love it. That's very cool to see in a 3D printed form. I'm glad that you were able to get your new Prusa printer. I have never used a Prusa machine in my entire life. I've used a few different FDM machines. One in particular that was like, I think the build volume was 1 meter cubed. It's called a 3DP. I think 3DP is the name of the company that makes the machine, and they just call the machine. I think it's like literally their only machine, and then they do different build volumes for it. But yeah, it's like a meter cubed machine. That's the biggest FDM machine that I've personally worked with, and honestly, it was a pain in the ass to work with, to be totally candid. Hudboy says it had no legs on the previous print there. Previously, solid piece, he had no time to break it up and didn't bother. That's right. And the Prusa machines are really awesome. Well, that's cool. I'm glad to hear it. Again, I'm not too familiar with the Prusa machines, but I can only assume just by looking at your print that the build volume and print quality is pretty similar to maybe like an Ultimaker, but Ultimaker tends to be a little bit more consistent than most other FDM machines, just from my personal experience playing around with those. But yeah, we'll keep just doodling here, sketching around. Not really any again particular goal in mind with something like this. More of just playing and sculpting and hanging out with you guys and getting to see some cool 3D prints of our pumpkin from Sculptember, which is always really fun to see that kind of stuff. I have an FDM machine coming in February. I'm sorry, an SLA machine, an SLA 3D printer, resin-based printing machine. And I'm pretty excited to finally get my hands on a personal SLA machine. I've done a bunch of SLA printing in the past, but never owned one. Normally they're much too expensive to own, especially if you want, top of the line. I won't name any names, but you guys can probably guess who I'm talking about. I think they're a little overpriced for what you get. I've had some trouble with them in the past, just in terms of consistency and parts failing rather frequently, especially lasers. Lasers in SLA machines can fail rather quickly and without warning, and you end up, when that happens, you end up ruining your little vat for your resin, because while the resin is curing and the laser is not quite curing as well as it needs to be, some of the resin can get stuck to that vat, and you end up needing to completely get rid of the vat if it becomes scratched or nicked or any kind of imperfection on that, because the laser then can't even shine through that correctly, and it's kind of this cycle of terrible things that happen, and it's pretty annoying to deal with that kind of stuff. But again, that is the current price of 3D printing and working with new technologies. So I guess that's the price you pay for wanting to use that kind of stuff. I'm hoping that my machine, which is the new Bean 3D printer, I'm hoping that things go well with that, and I'm very excited to get that and be able to print some stuff here at home more frequently. Hudboy says, Prusa Machine's awesome, reliable, has a lot of software compensation for imperfection in build, since half of them are kits. They're also self-calibrated. They can calibrate themselves. I don't think I've ever used an FDM machine that could calibrate itself. I've always manually had to calibrate it and, go through and tighten down some screws on the four corners of your bed to make sure that everything's lined up and ready to go. But I heard lasers and SLA machines are a little important. Yes, most definitely. Very important. Probably, it's kind of like, I've heard wheels are important for your car. Is that correct? It's the thing that makes it do the thing. It's the thing that makes it go. It's like, oh, the 3D printer doesn't have a cable to plug into the wall. Does it run off of magic? No, it needs that. It needs that to do the thing that it's supposed to do. But yeah, again, just really excited to get my hands on my Beam 3D printer. Check it out if you guys aren't familiar with that machine. I think it's a pretty great value for what you get, and I'm not sure if they're still available for the price that I was able to get mine for at the time, but I would definitely look into them if that's something that interests you. An SLA machine at a somewhat fair price, much more fair for the build volume and quality of machine that you're getting that you're going to find anywhere else. All right. We can continue to just do some different sketches here, as I didn't really like the direction that thing was going, and I'm feeling in maybe a little bit of an insecty mood, like I said, so we can like play around with that idea. My brother-in-law, who for a while kept bees, who was really interested in beekeeping, always asks me to sculpt him a bee for either Christmas or his birthday each year and print him one out. So maybe we're a little bit late, a little close to Christmas now, so I don't think it's gonna happen. Sorry, David, if you ever see this. I did not get you a bee for Christmas. Not this year. But maybe next, after I have my SLA machine. I actually have a pretty cool idea for a project I would like to do in the future, surrounded, based around that idea. And I'll tell you guys a little bit more about that as that becomes more of a reality. It does mesh bed leveling, so compensates for imperfect bed level. It's pretty interesting. Again, I've never had the luxury of having an FDM machine with that capability. It sounds nice, though. It sounds very, very nice to have that kind of feature. But yeah, we can continue to just kind of sketch around here. We've looked at clothes. We've looked at light live Boolean stuff today. A few other things. Again, we're in between projects, so just kind of sketching and coming up with ideas and playing around this morning. And I am just exhausted, so I don't mentally have the ability right now to like even think about just like what I'm waiting for my next full character, which I've been talking about, as well as in between there, just trying to get in some extra work for some little interesting projects here and there. And then yesterday was the first episode that myself and my friend Daryl released of Art Anonymous, and we've been experimenting with this little audio podcast format. It's just been something that we've been playing around with and having fun and talking about art and sculpting, and our first recording is most definitely our worst, except for maybe our worst recording is when I had my cough. I still very slightly have that cough, but you guys have probably heard me all week long coughing up a storm. It was really bad earlier this week, and I apologize for that. But we did one recording last week when I was even a little bit worse for wear on the cough, but now we're all good. So hopefully all future recordings are cough-free, and we have some cool ideas for what we want to do with that and experiment with it and where we want to take it and all that. So we shall see where that goes. But for now, I think it's just a fun little thing that we enjoy doing, getting together and talking about art and like I said, sculpting. Since he's a traditional sculptor and I'm a digital sculptor, it's really, I think, interesting to get those two different perspectives and just kind of, I think I said in the description, you know, art, life, and everything in between, and whatever else we can think of. But yeah, check it out if you haven't listened to it. It's on my YouTube channel. Last video released again yesterday. Art Anonymous. We talk about what is art. Specifically, we also talk about the four different kinds of art. There are, as we say in the video, only four kinds of art, and everyone knows this, and you would know it too if you listened to the video. All right, so kind of just sketching around, trying to go for maybe something a little bit insecty. And actually, just kind of playing with shape language here a little bit. Just a wee bit. excuse me. Interestingly enough, I think one of the things that we talk about and mention in our first episode of Art Anonymous is the drawing of an ant. And a little bit of a contest, not a contest, it was a little bit of an application or entrance exam for an art school, I believe, is what we were talking about. It's been a while since we've recorded that, but essentially the basic idea being that the person taking the test has to draw an ant without looking at any reference or anything like that. Ooh, that's fun. Just kind of biting your finger there. That's grody. But yeah, and essentially the idea is, you know, we all know what an ant is. We all have looked at ants before, but we've never really looked at an ant. Like, when you think about an ant maybe in your head, this is maybe more akin to what you picture. But when you look here, it's like there's a lot of complexity and stuff going on here. And if you were to attempt to draw this without, you know, looking at reference, or sculpt it without looking at reference, you would make something more akin to this. And maybe it would, depending on your own personal visual library and knowledge of such, it could be a little bit better. We got some fun little hanging down Cthulhu tendrils going on here, but I think it's the basic premise there was that it's very important to look at reference and to understand these things, even during non-production work, when you're just trying to practice and play around, or even just sketch like I'm doing here. I think it's very important to kind of keep these ideas in mind for these practices, because yeah, you hear a lot of people say, like, you know, practice makes perfect, and at the end of the day, practice, if you practice terribly, if you do shitty practice, it's not really gonna matter what the hell you practice. If you practice drawing the same face over and over and over and over again, or sculpting the same face over and over and over again, and there are some people that are very guilty of that, you know, you're not going to progress as quickly, or even maybe at all, as you could be if you were, you know, widening your scope there and playing around with some different things there. But yeah, it's hard to know what you should be doing a lot of the time. I just had someone this morning ask me, send me a personal message and ask me, I won't say who it was, but they asked me, how many hours a day should I be sculpting? How many hours a day? You know, I have a lot of free time now. How many hours a day should I be doing this? And I can't give you the answer to that. There's no 6 hours. There's no like, this is the magic number, the magic answer of how often and how much you should be doing this. You have to kind of audit your own time and figure out what you can do, and also look ahead and figure out what your goals are and figure out what the hell you're trying to accomplish. And then from there, actually make the schedule that you need to do to accomplish those desired goals. And I think for a lot of people starting out, you know, they think there's this formula that you can just do to go from A to Z, or K or M, or whatever step of the process you're trying to go to next. It doesn't matter. But the steps for A to B to C to D aren't the same for everyone. There is no exact concrete number of hours that you should be sculpting every single day. You know, obviously the best case scenario would be that you can just spend all of your free time sculpting all day long, and that would be the best scenario possible. But you can't. Nobody can do that. You have to take time to decompress and rest and you know, build up your I talk about a lot about how important rest is, and the more you rest, the more you're able to kind of put forward into your work, and I definitely do believe that, and it's impossible to devote all of your time to this. So there's no exact formula for this kind of thing. In the idea of, you know, art school and all this is that it tries to somewhat quantify these things that you need to do. And I think a lot of schools do a very, very good job of that, but at the same time, you know, not everybody's going to progress at the same level, not everybody starts at the same level, not everybody has the same innate kind of desire that pushes them forward as much as someone else. So there's a lot of stuff that you need to figure out for yourself. Like I said, you need to audit your own time, audit yourself, and figure out what works for you. So it's complicated. It's a complicated thing, and I am definitely no master and expert on that topic, on that subject, but from my own personal experience, that is what I have come to the conclusion of. That it's very much different for everybody, and that there is no exact number for how do I go from being a total noob to working in a video game studio, because that's what it seems a lot of people want to do. Personally, I like creating stuff for toys and collectibles a lot more currently, and in the future that might change, but that's what I'm really interested in, so that's what I am practicing every day and attempting to get better at and improve in those skills. So that's why I stay in ZBrush so much, and topology maybe isn't as important to me as it would be to someone who is more interested in creating some game-ready assets, which seem to be very high, just because I think a lot of people are very interested in video games and becoming a video game developer, and I've worked on small video game projects in the past, stuff throughout college, stuff with friends, and it's a lot of knowledge. It's a lot of different things that you have to do in that role. And when you're starting out from ground zero, it's like, holy crap, you don't know anything. There's so much that you don't know. I can't even begin to tell you what you don't know, because you're not even going to understand half of it. It's hard. It's a lot. It really is a lot. But I think with enough time and enough practice, I do believe that anybody can do it. And I believe that the only people that truly fail in these kind of endeavors are the people that give up. Oops. So, keep striving. Keep pushing forward. And I do believe that anybody and everybody will get there eventually, as long as they don't give up. So in the meantime, while not giving up, we're gonna put some little armies, some more armies on our characters. We did some armies on our, or we did some sleeveys on the armies of our little female character that we were playing with earlier. And now we can kind of just play around with different things here. This is a pretty, I haven't decided if I want to make this an actual anatomically correct ant or not. If I do, I should probably adjust some forms and shapes and such as get rid of these giant eyeballs, and another one, widen this head, round it out. We can start building towards the idea of an ant. Start with those basic forms. Maybe if something catches our eye, we can play with that. I don't think I've ever actually sculpted an ant before. I have sculpted a bee though, quite a long time ago. It would be very interesting, I think, to sculpt something like this again and see the progress over my time doing such, since I haven't done anything exactly like this in such a long time. Ants are pretty neat though. In terms of segments, they have a lot more going on than you initially think here. Let's check where our render is. I'm guessing like, ooh, okay, a little bit higher than I was thinking. I was guessing like 45-ish, 50%. So I think once that gets past his hand, I don't know if it'll do so during our stream here, then I'll start editing this guy. If you notice a little bit down here, if you see these little splotches here on his hand, on his foot, there's one up here on his eyebrow. Key shot, it might just be the material that I'm using, and there's some here on his shell. I'm going to be able to like spot heal a lot of those in Photoshop, and it can be a little frustrating to deal with those. From what I found, the higher you turn up your ray count in key shot, the less of those you get. They're like these little, I don't even know how to refer to them, these little mistakes that the render engine makes, and they're pretty frustrating to deal with, especially if you end up getting a lot of them. But overall, you can get rid of them as long as you take the time in Photoshop. So just coming through here carefully with your spot heal brush. Here on the back of the head, I have a backlight. It looks a little grainy, but that might just be this preview window here, so I'll wait to get the actual render and then make some changes. There's more up here on his nose. So again, they can be frustrating to deal with, but turning up that ray count, from what I have experienced, tends to alleviate a lot of those issues. But of course, the higher you turn up your ray count, the longer a render is going to take. So I try to go for a middle ground, somewhere between 25 to 50 rays in key shot. I typically, I think I did around a ray count of 30, 35 or so. And it seems that I've gotten a lot less of those little splotchy areas this time around than I have in the past. So here's to hoping that a great deal of that is taken care of by the end of that render. That preview window can be a little deceiving, I have found as well. So just the preview window, and you can't really zoom in too much to look at your details on that anyway. Let's do this. Let's save our ant image. Let's do downloads, save. Ooh, and actually, for people who saw that little guy before here in Discord, here's the Prusa print, and I'm not sure what you were printing on earlier, Hudman, if you're still in here, but here are some additional previous renders, and that was with his previous machine. Obviously the legs failed and the resolution wasn't nearly as great as it was for this print here. That one definitely turned out a lot better. But yes, I am trying to save our little ant. Save our little ant image here that I'm referencing, and then I can kind of import him into Spotlight, and you guys can see what I'm referencing as well. And scale, plop them up in the corner, and adjust our opacity. All right. Whew. Keep yawning. Like I said, I'm exhausted. I did not get home till pretty late last night, and then I've been riding a bike every day this week since I've gotten back from Italy, and my cough has not really helped me too much in that area, obviously, and I'm hoping, like I said, I feel like it's barely hanging on, almost gone, and then my body can go back into working order. So, looking at my reference up here, I'm attempting to capture this little bit of, they almost look like shoulders in his abdomen there. I'm trying to capture that little shape there as best as I can. So maybe just doing a quick little segment slice will do the trick. Can try that. Give us a little bit more control over our shape. And using our pinch brush can bring out that edge a little bit more. And can lower that resolution as it doesn't need to be that high anyway. Yeah, and that'll do. That'll do, pig. And if I turn off backface masking, we can modify this form a little bit here. Right after we crash ZBrush on a move operation. Love when that happens. Fix that. Let that load back up. Re-import that image and try to move something again. God forbid I try to use my move brush in ZBrush. Honestly, it's probably a combination of me running ZBrush, trying to do a Dynamesh operation, and also, you know, using 88% of my CPU to render this in Keyshot as fast as possible. Probably something to do with that. But ooh, we can import our little ant again real fast here. Ant.jpg. All right. Try to make a move again. One thing that gets old about ZBrush is that I wish I could just select all of my default tools that I want right out of the gate. It's another feature that I want implemented in the future. Just because I have to, you know, switch my select brush, switch my mask brush, and all of that every time. And it takes, you know, 10 seconds to do. It really does. It's not difficult. It's just that it gets old after a crash because you tried to use your move brush and you have to restart ZBrush again and again and again and again. It does get old during those times, but it's not the end of the world. There are many more features that I would greatly prefer over that. That is pretty low down on my list of important things I want. Most importantly, I think in my opinion, next I want to see some more control over our subtools and just better control over those overall. There's a lot of functionality that is pretty standard in a lot of other software packages that that just isn't easily and readily available in ZBrush, and that's unfortunate, but that's mainly just because of the way ZBrush has evolved over the years and how it is built on the back of a 2.5D painting / sculpting program, and it's kind of its purposes have kind of shifted and changed from its original intention quite a bit. Thankfully, ZBrush continues to innovate. The Pixelogic team continues to innovate and come up with some pretty dang creative ways to accomplish a lot of this stuff. But you know, you can't help but always ask for more. And I am definitely very appreciative of the free updates that have always come with ZBrush every single time there's a new update. And I pray that that continues as ZBrush moves forward. And there's been rumors from different people, but who knows what's true and what isn't, and where these rumors even come from for future releases. But I have high hopes and high expectations of ZBrush as it continues to kind of move forward and develop. I feel like, honestly, ZBrush is still ZBrush isn't that old, you know, it's not that old, and digital sculpting isn't that old altogether. If you go back even 5 years, I was going to say 10 years, if you go back even 5 years, just the tools that we have developed for ZBrush and for all of our 3D softwares, really, it's amazing to see that innovation, and you get stuff that you never would have expected. I don't think, you know, Sculptress, if you guys are familiar with the free sculpting tool that Pixelogic owns now, they bought that, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, off of someone else, and used that software to develop the tools for Dynamesh, this thing that I'm using right now. And I can't imagine a world in ZBrush in which Dynamesh doesn't exist anymore. Like, I could never imagine going back to not having Dynamesh, nor do I want to. It'd be terrible. I love Dynamesh, and I love the free form sculpting abilities that I have in ZBrush because of these tools. And taking those away, just like I said, going back like 5-10 years, it's pretty incredible, I think, just thinking about all that stuff and all these new technologies that we have. It's really incredible. And I can't, like I said, I have high hopes for ZBrush, so I can't wait to continue to see the new innovation and stuff that comes out. But you know, I'm also not afraid to say that something could come forward and replace ZBrush completely. Who knows? I would be happy to see another program give some competition to ZBrush, as it's been the top dog in sculpting, at least this type of sculpting, I think, for quite a while. ZBrush is, I think, one of its closest competitions in terms of sculpting software is software that costs like anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000. And it requires like this little Ergotron arm device that you have to use with that. And it's not, I would say that the learning curve for that software is even steeper than ZBrush. The documentation for it and the number of people that use it is very small. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Alright, try to finally get around to connecting all our little segments here. So we're trying to block out these early stages of our ant boy and see what we can do here. That move back face masking, always coming in handy. Use that for just about everything. I don't actually know how that's connected right through there, as I can't see it, so I'm going to have to probably grab a different view and get a better idea what's happening there underneath or behind that leg. For our arms here, I think I'm just gonna like come through here and duplicate a bunch of little segments. Begin blocking out these, getting these into position. Playing around with a bunch of different sketches today, actually. We've looked at live Boolean stuff a little bit earlier, as well as extraction for clothing, which is something I use quite frequently. As well as, you know, just some fun blocking out here with an insect and just doing some sketching. It looks like the legs have the same number of segments. I've never really looked at this before, or I think realized this, but that first segment is extremely short on that back leg, which is pretty interesting how that changes there. I wonder if that's similar across lots of insects. I would guess that it is. Probably a pattern that replicates across from there. There's also some really interesting golden ratio aspects for the segments of insects. Like, if I can show you, if I can find a quick golden ratio ant. I can't remember what the ratio is. Is it like 1.3 or something? It's like 1 point. What is it? Well, or 1.6, roughly 1.6, and just how that like replicates across the different segments of an ant. I think that's just like incredible, and it seems like maybe that might replicate at least a little bit through the segments here, and a lot of that stuff exists in our human body as well. And it's just like, it's amazing that you can find a lot of this stuff in just about everything. It's I don't think a coincidence. Getting that last little bit there, and then kind of turns here a little bit. Wow, that was terrible. Something just really generically blocked out like that. And I just used the insert little, if I can pull it up, the insert little capsule, or that's not even it. I have to have the correct brush there. The insert little capsule here, I'm using the insert multi-mesh primitive brush. That's a default brush. You can just find that up here in your brush menu. you have a bunch of insert mesh brushes, but insert multi-mesh primitive. And then with that, they should appear at the top of the screen for you. I have that turned off for me as it gets in the way and messes with my UI. You can also pull all of these objects up by pressing the M key on your keyboard and just having access to all those all those multiple meshes, the MM part of the IMM brush, the multi-mesh. And then there's like a little hook back there on that back leg, which is also pretty interesting, and it seems to carry down through those segments as well. So what I'm gonna do here from this point is merge down all of these different segments and just quickly duplicate a couple of these. So pulling down here, into this little bit of middle segment there in the abdomen, making that inner segment a little shorter, and I guess we can try just rotating out and probably looking at a couple different top views and different ideas so that we can get an idea of the exact angle that we want to pose these at, as well as these are slanted back a little bit, so making sure that we represent that just a little bit more accurately, or as accurately as we can here. Seems like this segment here is maybe a little bit longer, and I think maybe I can make that segment a little bit longer on that guy as well. We can look at doing that. More of an exercise in reading reference and form here, which is something we try to do a lot here on the stream, just because I think it's so important. Try to grow that even more. I think I can also mess with my segments a little bit up there and adjust some of that. Just to make that proportionally make more sense. You can also see that that segment there looks to be quite a bit longer on that leg than the previous there. Can try to lengthen that. And just get that into a rough general position there. Could probably even use one of these legs to block out the shape of our antenna up here as we get into that. Timothy asks, is it possible to use VR ZBrush for R8? To my knowledge, it is not. I'm in the process of purchasing an HP ZBook X2 with 64 gigs of RAM. That's what I have currently on my machine, and 2 terabytes of probably HDD space. Thanks kindly. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Appreciate it. Glad to have you on the stream hanging out with us. But to my knowledge, it is not possible to sculpt in VR with ZBrush. But in the future, who knows? Here's hoping. I feel like VR has kind of lost a lot of its initial traction that it had. You know, this is kind of like the second attempted push real hard at VR. There was like a push way back with was it the Virtual Boy and a lot of technologies back then that attempted to, but the technology just wasn't ready. And that was a long time ago, and now I think there's this additional push, and I feel like the technology at least for consumer products, still just isn't quite there. I feel like obviously it's a lot closer than it was in the past, but I feel like it has lost a lot of that traction that it had initially, and some of it's still holding on, and consumer products do exist, but they're still pretty damn expensive, you know. I think an HTC Vive is like, what, $800, and I don't even know what the availability on those is currently. Not to say that they're not awesome. I have got to play with the Vive as well as, you know, the Oculus Rift, and I definitely think that the Vive is top dog, at least currently in my mind. I know I know that the Oculus has done some new stuff, kind of replicating what HTC Vive does with the two controllers, and I think it's what Oculus Touch is what it's branded as right now. I'm not too well kept up on that stuff anymore, but it is awesome, I think. And I had predicted originally that, you know, I think we'll be sculpting in VR by around 2019. I don't know if that's still true, just because I think VR has kind of died out a little bit. I am hoping that I can do some sculpting, and we do have VR sculpting. To be totally candid here, it's pretty shitty. There's an Oculus sculpting program, I believe it is Oculus that has it currently, and it's really cool. It's definitely really cool, but it's just nowhere near, you know, as powerful as ZBrush. It's nowhere near what you can do in ZBrush, and you can't really take what you get from there, and you can't really have as much control over your topology. I would say that those tools, I can't even remember what the software is called off the top of my head, but I would say it's pretty akin to Sculptress, and, you know, I've seen some amazing stuff be made in Sculptress before, absolutely, but I just don't think the tools are quite there yet. But I would love to be doing some VR sculpting in ZBrush. I think that would be just totally awesome. But maybe wearing the face mask all day would get a little old, so I don't know how I would feel about that. Probably wouldn't be able to do it all day long like I can with sculpting here inside of ZBrush right now. You can do it for just hours and hours and hours, and not have a face mask pressed up against your face to be bothering you. But yes, no ZBrush sculpting quite yet. Here's hoping, fingers crossed. And who knows? Like I said, I made that 2019 prediction, and I hope it's true. I feel like, you know, we already got some tech. I don't know if it will be ZBrush, the one to do it first and create tools that are, you know, top of the line and the stuff that we actually need and use for production ready content. But I would like for it to be, you know, Pixelogic. I'm a big ZBrush fan, obviously. It's the software that I use here on stream and use on my channel and use for work. It's what I prefer. But who knows? Who knows, really? I think you can create some, if you go on Instagram and check out, oh gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name, but there's one pretty famous and popular, very talented ZBrush sculptor who's been playing around with the Oculus VR sculpting tool. I haven't seen so much recently from him in it, but gosh, what is his name? I'll have to look it up later and mention it on our next stream. But yeah, there's some just really cool stuff that he's been doing. But he's just extremely talented. He's an amazing sculptor. He's been sculpting for quite a while, and it shows. These little nubules back here are giving me some trouble. I need to shorten them just a ton. These back legs are even longer on that segment, which is pretty crazy. Ooh, nah, I won't do that. Auto groups is awesome. I just wish that the functionality of auto groups would carry across your symmetrical axis. There's another little thing I want added to my ZBrush list of things I want. I could probably sit here and talk about things I want in future releases of ZBrush all day, but there's another little one. I want all functions to carry across my symmetrical plane. If I do something on one side, I want that to happen over there. Now if I turn off symmetry and do an auto groups, yeah, sure, that's fine. But if I have symmetry on, you know, please do that. And of course, you know, I can auto groups and then mirror and weld, but I can't always mirror and weld with my geometry. Particularly if I have subdivision levels, this function cannot be applied on a mesh with subdivs. Makes it a little bit more difficult. Let's see here. Let's try shifting this a little bit. We'll see how it goes. Ooh, a little uneven. Let's we'll do that one at a time, I think, just to not completely F that up. Timothy says, Autodesk products use VR to the best of my knowledge. From UK and have 24-inch Wacom HD touch, I believe is what you meant there, which I use. Yeah, but Autodesk products and sculpting aren't exactly akin to ZBrush so much. I won't even get started on Mudbox just because of reasons. I'm definitely a ZBrush fanboy. ZBrush all day, every day, until a software comes along that actually gives me a reason to not use ZBrush over its competition. I will continue to use the best product that I can, which today is ZBrush. Like I said, I would be totally happy if Pixelogic were to implement VR sculpting to a higher degree of capability, but I would be totally fine with another software coming along as well. I'm not someone who is much of a brand loyalty person. And I think most people are that way. You know, they're going to use the best tool for the job that they have access to. And today that's ZBrush, but tomorrow it might not be. I think that's a huge part of just the 3D landscape in general. It's just there's so many new tools always coming out, new functionality, new updates for software even that you just have to be aware of and be up to date on those kinds of things. Every time a new release of ZBrush comes out, I spend, you know, just a day, maybe two, just learning these new functionalities that are introduced to ZBrush. With 4R8P2, there really wasn't. There was a ton of new stuff. There was, but not enough that, you know, it didn't take me longer than a day to play around with the Text 3D tool and Live Booleans, the 3D Gizmo, the new deformations that we have in here, Just there's like I said, there's a lot of great stuff, but it doesn't really take that long to get up to date back on your new functionality and stuff that's introduced to your software. But always learning a new tool, that's always I would say can be a bit of a challenge depending on the software. And we all know that ZBrush has a pretty dang steep learning curve that can be a little bit rough when you're starting out. But honestly, that's not even the hardest part of ZBrush. I always say that the sculpting is something that's going to take much longer for you to learn and master over the software. I know how to use ZBrush. I know how to use almost everything in ZBrush software-wise, capability-wise, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I can use ZBrush to its full extent and full power just because of my sculpting abilities aren't as good as other people's. But software-wise, you know, I'm totally comfortable in this tool, and I understand a lot of its little tricks and tips. You know, if you're trying to live stream using ZBrush or maybe even record some stuff, you can come into your performance tab and lower your max CPU threads so that it'll use less of your CPU on functionality such as Dynamesh or ZRemesh. There's only really a few different functions in ZBrush that really tax your CPU, but for the most part, ZBrush is really using your RAM. Keyshot's using my CPU right now, about 75% of it, and that's totally fine. But if we look at ZBrush here, CPU says 0%. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And then if we look at RAM, it's using close to a gig. But you know, as I start working here and do some more complex operations, it can get upwards to using like 18 gigs of RAM at a time, especially as my undo history count starts to get larger and larger and larger, and I work on this project here. But yeah, I think we've done a lot of progress here on our block out for our ant. I've had fun just kind of sketching and talking and playing around with this. From this point, you know, we don't even have to continue going the ant direction. We could go a completely different direction if we want. We have that luxury and freedom. But using an insect, or using, I think, anything from real life as like a starting point for a creature or any kind of, even maybe like something that's more mechanically created, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do with that method. Let's see where our render is here. It is past the hand, 77%. So I could stop this and just grab what we have. Ooh, excuse me. And then make some changes from there. I think I'm gonna let it go a little bit longer. I don't think this last little bit, just because its background render is going to take very long. It seems to be going a lot faster than when it was rendering this stuff here. If you guys weren't around, I see some new people kind of popping in here. We just got done doing a little bit of a Bowser Jr. sketch in between projects, and before that, we did a little Mercy sculpt here. Original concept from Zeronis, so it's Mercy, a little mashup with the Blink 182 cover, if you guys know that. So those were the last two projects that we did, just quick little things over the past week. Nothing crazy. Now we're kind of just sketching and hanging out today on stream, at least for the morning stream here. Started off working on an ant here a little while ago, and I'm going to maybe continue messing with this, maybe move on to another project. Really, I don't know. I'm having fun working on the ant, and I think, let's see, I think that's pretty close to time, so I'll hang out a little bit longer here. And if you guys have any questions before I bounce, throw them up in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those before I head out here. But yeah, I think we're getting close here. to be in a good place with this. And like I said, I'm in between full character projects, and if there's a particular character that you think I might be interested in, if there's something, I love Nintendo, which is why we did our little Bowser Jr. sketch, our little Bowser Jr. sculpt here recently. He didn't take long to do. I think we rushed through him in just a few days. So if you guys got anything that you think I might like, particular concept or something, and you want to send that my way, please do. Probably the best way to send me stuff is going to be on the ZBrush Discord here. If you guys are a part of this, you can contact me through here and find me on Discord and send me a personal message. You can just right-click me and click message there. Or if you're not a part of that, real quick here, you can go to my YouTube channel, go to the About page, and then click ZBrush Discord channel, and that is the invitation link for that. So do that, and it's just a excuse me, a community-managed ZBrush Discord channel. There is an official ZBrush Discord channel as well, but people seem to be at least a little bit more active in this one. We're right over 1,200 members, I think. Obviously not that many people are always chatting. That would be, I think, a little hectic, but if you're looking for feedback, critique, or just hang out with like-minded people that are maybe on the same kind of journey that you're on with ZBrush or just 3D in general, I think that's a pretty good community of people and a pretty great place to get that kind of interaction. So check it out if you're not a member already. Again, About page of my YouTube, and then just click that ZBrush Discord channel link and get that invitation. And if you don't know what Discord is, I guess that's also a possibility. Discord is just a chat client. So it's actually one of the most popular and best. So if you don't know what Discord is, where have you been? Come on, get up with your tech. You've been behind. If you're gonna be a 3D artist and be playing around with anything in this realm, you got to stay up to date on that kind of stuff. Get your geek on. Can't just be knowledge of 3D software, but you just gotta know all the software that's coming out. That's not true. I'm just kidding. Alright, I'm just cleaning up some of that junk there and trying to modify that interaction between the arm there a little bit better, as it looks like it tucks up under there, connects underneath. Just using my move brush and a little bit of trim to clean that up. And for the antenna, let's try let's try just grabbing these last two segments, I guess, and using these as a base for placing these on here. Also, another thing that you might be disillusioned about for antenatomy, these antennae are like in the middle of the face, not necessarily up towards the top, which is where I think a lot of people would place them without reference. And there are different kinds of ants and different kinds of insects, so I'm sure the placement of antenna are different for all of these things. But just little things like that, I think that people don't realize and don't think about. Whoa, that was weird. I think that alone is like enough evidence that you should be using just a crap ton of reference for everything that you do. You want to be as accurate as possible, or even if you don't, grab that reference. It's going to help you a lot. Unless you're just so confident in your own personal visual library, it's tucked up in that big old brain of yours, that you think you don't need it, then go for it. It's a little thick there. I can try to just tap with my smooth brush very lightly and thin that out, as well as grow or lengthen. Not necessarily grow, but grow that out a little bit. And then add a little tweak at the end. But our geometry is pretty janked up there. So we can try to get a quick subdiv and get a little bit of a turn there. But yeah, I think our ant block out looks pretty good for, you know, just probably about 45 minutes there, just blocking out some junk and trying to keep in with proportions. Our head can be a bit bigger. Our placement of level for these different objects could be a bit better as well, and we can tweak those and mess with those. But even if we don't want to go the ant route, like I said, if you want to start using that as a base and then start transitioning that into your own creature or whatever you're trying to make. But yeah, I think that's a good place to end the stream. It doesn't look like anybody has any additional questions, so with that, I thank you all for coming and hanging out with me here while I do some junk and just some sketching and practicing here in ZBrush. In between projects for the next stream, which will maybe be later tonight, I'm thinking if anything around like 6 or 7 p.m. I will let you guys know the specifics of that later, but I hope to see you around then. If you are available, come hang out with me, ask some questions if you're available. And no worries if you missed any of the stream in the past, either today or even on a previous day. All of my streams get uploaded to YouTube afterwards, so no worries there if you miss anything. And again, thanks for coming, and I hope to see you all in the next stream. So see you guys. Have a great day or night wherever you guys are located. Bye now.